Every day, over 35 million people around the world take to the road behind the wheel of a motor car. Be it on a crowded motorway or mountain pass, desert road or bushland track, the motor car has become the world's most popular form of transport. It's part of modern mythology. Certain makes represent certain lifestyles, aspirations and status. For many, driving a motor car is simply a form of transport. But this programme is going to take a look at a different type of driver. People with a quest for speed and the desire to push themselves to the limit and beat the competition. There can be few of us that have not at one time or another imagined ourselves behind the wheel of a powerful racing car, perhaps in a daydream that found us taking the checkered flag at a Formula One Grand Prix. Or winning the Monte Carlo Rally. That's just one of the reasons why motor racing remains the world's most popular spectator sport. But what is it that turns the average road driver into a world champion? This programme aims to find out. If anyone could be said to be synonymous with motor racing, it must surely be Stirling Moss. In the 50s, Moss won just about everything going, switching with ease from Formula One to sports cars, from hill climbs to rallies, always with great success. The years have done little to quell Stirling's passion for the sport, and he's still racing successfully today.
Now this brings back many happy memories. This is a Formula 500 that has been lovingly restored by the National Motor Museum here at Bewley. I first drove one of these actually in 1948. They really were the best way then to enter serious Formula racing. Proper little racing cars with a simple 500cc engine tucked away in the back here, giving about 50 horsepower, air-cooled. The cars were strictly controlled and winning was all down to the driver's skill. They provided really close racing, I can tell you. Now, although she may look a little bit antiquated, I suppose, the basic skills required to keep this beauty on the track, and more importantly, in front of the opposition, were pretty much the same as those needed to win today. Of course, nowadays the machinery is much more sophisticated. For instance, take this Formula One car here. This is a McLaren. This gives over 600 horsepower. And just to put that into some perspective, that's about 8 times more powerful than the average family car in a vehicle that weighs about, I suppose, 1/3 of the weight. When I started racing, it was really a matter of getting hold of a car and giving it a go. Today, with a seemingly endless choice of classes and approved racing schools to point you in the right direction, anyone who fancies trying their hand at the sport can.
Many people get their first taste of motor racing through karting, but do not confuse these thoroughbred racers with the machines you find at amusement parks. Capable of 90 miles an hour with the drivers seated only an inch or two above the ground, karting is a very serious form of motorsport. It's acknowledged as being the proving ground for the Formula One stars of the future. Nigel Mansell, Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost were all successful kart racers. The sport's most recent graduate is Johnny Herbert, who spent his formative years racing here at Buckmore Park in Kent under the watchful eye of team manager Bill Sisley.
I've worked in the sport for 30 years now. I used to race myself for many years, and obviously my son's now racing, and I've helped many drivers through their karting career and actually on to motor racing. I mean, Johnny Herbert is my most, I suppose, famous protege as such, and he's doing very well now. There's lots more drivers coming through the ranks that I'm helping now. You know, it just obviously is a great breeding ground for motor racing drivers.
So can you tell? Can you
tell?
tell?
Yes, I can. I can tell you maybe today 4 or 5 drivers here that in 10 years' time will be household names in motor racing.
They start 'em young in kart racing. The cadet class for 8 to 12-year-olds offers the earliest possible start in official motor racing. The current world champion in the 250E class is Martin Hines, who's been racing karts for over 25 years.
To be honest, they're fairly difficult to drive because they're very direct. The tyres, which got all the latest technology of slick tyres and everything, the brakes are disc brakes, hydraulic disc brakes and so on. It's a proper racing machine, but it is very direct driving. So what it does, it makes the driver very smooth. We're ending up with kids of 9 or 10 who could outdrive you and me on the roads. And that's true. And at the end of the day, that's going to make the safer roads. When the kids get to 16, 17, 18, they'll have been racing for 8 years. The best thing it has to offer for the kids side of it is that what it does, it builds character into them, because they can be out there winning a race, and on the last lap, a mechanical failure causes it to stop. And it isn't them that has lost the race, it's someone else. And they've got to be able to handle that. And that goes a long way in life, to be able to handle something that's outside of your control.
Like all forms of motorsport, kart race meetings start with a scrutineering session. Each kart is checked by qualified RAC examiners to ensure that both the machinery and protective clothing comply with the rules. All motor racing in the UK is administered by a division of the RAC called the Motorsports Association. Naturally, the emphasis is on safety, and driver briefing sessions are designed to drum home the safety message.
If you've signed on, you agree to abide by this blue book that I'm holding. And you also agree to be punished by the blue book that I'm holding, which I hope I don't have to punish anybody today. You will have the safety of yourself and everyone at this circuit today paramount in your mind. That includes spectators, TV men and me.
Kart races use rolling starts. In other words, after a couple of slow laps in your grid position, the lights turn green, then it's foot hard down and every man for himself. Karting is fast, furious and relatively inexpensive. The cadet classes use a simple 60cc engine and the adults 100cc's that develop around 22 brake horsepower as they scream up to 18,000 revs. Ten-year-old Tom Sisley, seen here carving his way to the front in kart 88, already has a lifetime's worth of racing memories.
Oh, I came second in the British Championships, and on my first British Championships I was fifth and I was eighth, and I got knocked off. Oh, it's just the speed really, and it's nice getting up early in the morning, going out to kart circuits and just racing.
12-year-old Dan Wheldon is 3 times British cadet champion. What are his plans for the future?
Formula 3000s, hopefully, and then hopefully to Formula 1.
What do you reckon the chances are of doing?
Well, I wouldn't like to say really, I'm not sure, but hopefully they're high.
Another way of finding out whether motor racing is for you is to sign on for a trial session with a reputable school. The Brands Hatch Racing School, which was established back in 1964, has earned itself an enviable reputation for producing champions. James Hunt is just one in a long list of drivers who learnt the basics here. So let's follow the progress of a typical pupil through the early stages of a course.
It's a dream. You aspire to becoming a racing driver, but obviously the law says you can't on the roads. I certainly love it. I watch it every fortnight throughout the entire season. And now to be given the chance to actually learn how to do it properly, I think I'm in for a rude awakening anyway. I think everybody who, again, likes driving believes they can be a racing driver. You watch Mansell and Senna and think, well, that's easy. I think I'm going to find it enlightening.
So what is Simon up against? Well, let's sit in on a few laps of Brands Hatch in Dave Bartram's turbocharged Sierra, with that man Moss at the wheel. Stirling still favours his old crash helmet and racing overalls, the very same that he was wearing back in the 50s when he won 17 Grand Prix.
Check on the gears. Into the right now, I'm using the whole road here. Again, into the right, over the slight waffle there, because you're lifting, you've got very little weight on the right tire when you're in a right-hander, so it's okay. Right, now coming along the straight, get over to the middle of the road from this corner because you can't really see it. Brake, turn in earlier than you think you want to, right into the inside, full power now out to the outside. Come up under the bridge, change down, heel and toe just slightly on the downturn, right into the right-hand side, slight understeer, power in. On the lower part here, right, as I was saying, you use all the road you reasonably can. You go right over to the left, pull into the right. If it's tarmac, try and use it. I'm coming up to just on 6,500 revs. Brake. Over to the left, tuck into the right, foot flat down. I'm down now.
It'll be a long time before Simon can drive like that, and much of what Stirling was saying probably sounded like gobbledygook. The skills necessary to drive at such high speeds can only be perfected with practice. But theory before practice. It's time for a classroom session.
OK, so now let's have a little look at exactly how we should be taking these corners. After all, that is part of the whole being of being a racing driver, is knowing how to take the corners. It's very easy to go down the straight bits. You just put your foot down. We're coming up to a 90-degree right-hand bend, as we have here. Now, the first thing that we have to do is to position ourselves to the outside of the corner. We want to go in as wide as possible into the bend. Now, the idea of actually going through the corner on our racing line, what we call the racing line, is to actually take a line of almost constant radius through the corner. And it's got to be a line of the longest possible radius that we can achieve through that bend. In other words, what we're trying to actually do is straighten the corner out. If we look at that line through there, we can see that we're trying to straighten the corner out as much as possible. We could, if we wanted, go right round the inside. But if we did this, although it would be the shortest route through the corner, it would also be the tightest and therefore one of the slowest ways of getting around the bend. So we go in as wide as possible initially, braking up to our entry point, getting all the braking done in a straight line before the corner, so that we can really get the car slowed down before we turn in. Then we turn into the corner, in towards the apex of the bend, coming in right from the outside now to the innermost point of the circuit, and then beginning to accelerate as we come through this part. So we're accelerating all the way out of the corner and coming out on the exit, and again, really using the full width of the road. So we've really tried to straighten that corner out, accelerating as we come out, and then, of course, we're going to be fast all the way down the next straight, and that'll bring us as fast as possible into the next corner.
There is no hiding it. Motor racing is a dangerous sport. However stringent the safety rules, however skillful the drivers, at some time something will go wrong. Although mechanical failure accounts for many accidents, by far the largest percentage are caused by driver error, and it's not a new problem.
As the cars struggled their way through the early dawn towards Lavinia and the end of one of the rally's most grueling sections, near tragedy struck, reducing the field to just 41 survivors. Whether the altitude affected the crew and caused the disaster, none will ever know. But for Andrew Carn and his co-drivers in Triumph number 43, this Gran Premio stage high in the Andes saw the end of their challenge. Motoring quickly on loose gravel, they rounded a bend only to vanish completely from sight as they plunged off the road and down a mountainside to finish an almost unrecognizable heap of twisted metal below. Fellow competitors stopped to give what help they could, and the injured crew were finally rushed to hospital. Incredibly, all three escaped the terrible injuries they seemed certain to suffer. But their disaster heavily underlined the frightening consequences should car or driver fail.
Modern technology ensures that today's racing car is a far safer piece of machinery. Circuits too have better surfaces, safer crash barriers and are better controlled. It's important for any beginner to recognise the various flag signals used by race marshals to control the flow of traffic around a circuit. For instance, if you're shown a blue flag, there's another car close behind you. If it's waved, that car is trying to overtake you. Give him room. If you're shown a yellow flag, there's danger ahead of you. A car may have spun off the track. Slow down. If you're shown a yellow and red stripe flag, it means the track surface ahead is slippery, perhaps from oil leaking from another competitor's car. Beware. A red flag signifies you should stop racing immediately and return to the pits slowly. There's probably been a major accident in front of you. And conversely, a green flag tells you that you've passed a danger area or incident on the track. One flag you should never hope to see is the black flag, the naughty boys signal. This signifies you've either broken the rules or that you're driving dangerously. The clerk of the course, the all-seeing, all-powerful controller of the race meeting, will want to see you as soon as you come into the pits. Be prepared for a serious ticking off, or worse still, a suspension of your racing licence. Having been briefed on these basic circuit rules, Simon gets straight out onto the track for his first taste of the real thing. At Brands Hatch, every pupil drives their first few laps in a race-prepared Ford XR2 with a qualified racing instructor in the passenger seat. Simon's instructor is Ben Edwards, and like all his colleagues, Ben is an accomplished professional racing driver.
Yep, sure am. So if you'd like to hop in the driver's seat, okay, thank you very much. Okay, Simon. Now the first step is to make sure we're the right distance away from the wheel. You've got your hands in 10 to 2 position there, but it's looking slightly stretched. We really should have slightly bent arms, so just move the seat forward a little bit there. Okay, now how does that feel? Does that feel better?
Fine.
Good. Just make sure you can press the clutch right down. You've got full travel on the clutch. Yeah. That's okay. Next step then is to get you into the seat belt. So arm through both sides there, that's it. Through that side as well, just make sure that's straight. Buckle that up across your waist and then just tighten up. Across the lap first. This one. And then pull down on those shoulder straps. Okay. Okay, does that feel good? Doesn't pull you too far back into the seat? Still comfortable. Fine. Okay, right, let's go then.
Okay.
This first session is just aimed at assessing a pupil's driving ability, a chance for Ben to establish what he has to work with.
During the assessment, the idea really is just to make sure the driver is aware of what's around him, that he's looking ahead, thinking ahead, and not just charging into situations and trying to sort them out, but hopefully a little bit of foreplanning and looking at what he's trying to do next. We're looking for smoothness as much as anything. We're certainly not looking for heroics at this stage. It really is a question of just taking it smooth and steady, and we want to see how well they treat the car. The lines aren't too important at this stage. We'll be looking at the lines later on. So really it's the basic control and technique of driving. Come through it, and this takes us onto the back straight. Try and position yourself a little bit more to the right hand side of the circuit. That's good, just coming out along the bottom straight into 30s. That's good. Okay, close into the curving there, that's it. Now up into clearway, slowing it down, taking third gear here. And then we want to get over to the right-hand side of the track. Just follow it in on the right-hand side. You'll see a dotted line where the pit lane starts. Follow it into the pit lane there. And then we'll go just down here on the right, and we'll stop on the right-hand side. Okay. Okay, Simon, well done. Very good. Did you enjoy that?
I certainly did.
Good.
Very good indeed.
Different experience, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, now then, let's go through what you were doing right and wrong out there. Okay, it was actually a very good drive. Well done.
Thank you.
Getting yourself together very well. But a few things that we've got to think about, particularly pertaining to this corner at the end of the straight here. It's called Paddock Hill Bend, and it is one of the most difficult corners of any circuit anywhere in the country. The main thing we've got to do there is to make sure that we brake before we get to the corner. So we're braking in a nice straight line before we turn in.
Right.
Okay, get the braking knob before the corner, and then as we turn into the bend, we can then actually begin to accelerate through, and that keeps the car nice and stable. So if we come back to the sheet, very important that we get our brake in a straight line before the corner.
Right.
Okay, that is very, very important. A couple of other things that we're looking at as well. Hand positions on the wheel. Very important that we've got our hands 10 to 2 and turning with the wheel as you go through the corner. Don't feed the wheel, otherwise you're going to get yourself into trouble and you can lose track of exactly where the front wheels are. Okay. So always turn with the wheel. Heel and toe is something that we're also looking for. This is a technique where we're braking and blipping the throttle when we're changing down for a corner. So we've actually got our foot on the brake and the throttle for a little while there. We're not trying to drive against the brake, but it does involve making the gear change more smooth. Right. We will be looking at we'll be looking at that a little bit later anyway, so you'll be able to see what that's all about. Okay. Okay. Revs, do keep to 4,000 revs, please. All right. Just creeping a little bit over once or twice. Okay. Do make sure that we watch the rev counter. Okay, that's your bit over. I'm now going to drive you around for a couple of laps to put into practice what we've been saying and hopefully show you how we should do it.
Brilliant.
Okay, so let's swap around.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Let's consider some basic statistics. If Ben were driving the XR2, he would turn into Paddock Hill Bend at about 105 miles an hour. Simon, even after a full day's tuition, will manage between 65 and 70. Finding the fast way around the corners is what racing's all about.
Now let's have a word about this racing line business. Now obviously when you're racing you use all the road that you reasonably can. In other words, you start on the outside, you clip the corner there, and you go as far out there as you reasonably can, depending on the surface and so on. Now, but the big difference in racing, racing fast round a corner and driving on the road is that the controls do things slightly differently. In other words, I use the steering here to present the car. In other words, I say to the car, we're going left. Now, when I get the car starts to go left, I then bring in the power. I bring in quite a lot of power, and the back comes out because I'm increasing it, and it's oversteering. In other words, the back end is trying to go round. I get to here, and I then take the steering off, and they're beginning to come straight. power still on, and I go right across there, and when I get to this point here, I should be A, flat out on the accelerator, and B, the car should be going straight and up the straight there. Now, there are a few problems about it because it doesn't work quite as easily as that. The point is, if you come in and you put the throttle on in the wrong place or too much of it, you can then cause understeer. Understeer is when you put the steering over like that and the car is not steering. In other words, it's understeering and you're going out like that. Also, if on the other hand you put too much throttle on, you can also oversteer and it'll do that. So it's a balance of these things. It's a balance of the oversteer, the understeer, when you turn it in, how much throttle you give and so on, that makes the difference between Fangio and you and I.
Well, maybe you or I, but certainly not Stirling. Watch this rare footage of Stirling driving a Jaguar XK120 back in the 50s. See how the wheels are straight, even though he controls the car in a perfect four-wheel drift at over 100 miles an hour.
Now, another thing that is important is when you're coming in and you're braking, most corners you have to brake for. When you're braking, the car is basically unstable and it's inclined to sort of do this. Now, if you're good enough, a later stage, you can start to use the instability of the car to steer it. In other words, to your benefit. And the better you get, the deeper you can go into a corner with a bit of brakes on. Because as I explained, when the brakes are on, the car is obviously loaded onto the front. The back is looser, and therefore you can use that to help you go round the corner. But the important thing is to try to get the power down as early as you can, as long as you're not spinning the wheels, of course, and pointing straight. Don't turn the steering wheel too much, because the more you turn the steering, the more drag you get. Because when a steering wheel, if you try pushing a car, you know it's quite easy to roll it along. You start turning the steering wheel and you see how difficult it becomes. Well, that's exactly the same thing for the engine. The engine is having to do the work that you normally do when you're pushing it. So therefore, the more straight you keep your wheels to go round corners, the better. That is why, if you can bring in the power and get the back end to help steer you, this is a benefit.
There are subtle differences in the way a driver approaches cornering in a front or four-wheel drive car, but the principles remain the same. Try to use as little steering wheel movement as possible. The least amount of wheel movement equals the least amount of drag. So, if you can put all that together, what does it feel like? Let's take a lap around the complete Grand Prix circuit at Brands in a Formula 3000 car. Notice how the driver seems to be using constant small wheel movements to keep control. Contrary to popular belief, these are simply corrections, not a driving technique. Brands Hatch instructors tell us they are amazed at the amount of new students who soar away at the steering wheel in the belief that it's the right thing to do. At such high speeds, upwards of 180 miles an hour in places, each slight bump in the circuit is amplified through the steering wheel. Most of the time, the driver is simply correcting the movements these cause. Simon is getting his first experience of high-speed driving. Ben drives a series of laps, each slightly quicker than the last, until he's approaching race speed. Notice how little effort he uses to control the car. Forcing yourself to relax whilst driving at speed is yet another technique that needs to be mastered.
Accelerating at the moment still. We're just hitting about 100 miles an hour now, and then going onto the brakes, braking in a straight line, coming off the brakes, turn in, back on the power as we go through, and once again using the full width of the road as we get to the outside. Back on the brakes, slow it down a little bit, come round the top of the hairpin, then ease it back into the apex, back on the power as we come out of the corner. Fourth gear, got to be a bit careful here, we've got a car in front. We should be able to overtake on the left as we come past. So we just go through on the left and along to the next left-hander. Again, a bit of traffic in front of us. Slow it down a little bit. Careful of where they're going. Down to third gear. Go around the outside here. Obviously we're offline now, so we have to be a bit careful. Now we can get back on the power again for another lap. the way out to the edge, back in again, to the right, onto the main straight.
Driving smoothly is what it's all about. By looking through the corner to his clip and then exit point, Ben is always working ahead of himself and is able to avoid major corrections that could unstabilise the car. Notice how Ben keeps his hands in the same position on the wheel, even though he's taking extreme angle corners. It may fail you your driving test, but it's essential on the racing circuit.
In a clean condition. And then in the middle of the corner, then we'll spin.
By doing all his braking and gear changes in a straight line, Ben is able to keep the car stable through the corners and exit each one at maximum speed. There's an old rule applied here: going slowly into a corner ensures that you're quick out of it.
One more lap. Right out to the edge again there. Into 4.
Let's quickly remind ourselves of the main techniques Ben is using. Keep both hands on the wheel all the time. One hand should only come off for the split second it takes to change gear. Also, they should stay in the 10 to 2 position, even when taking extreme corners. You don't lose any points for crossing your hands in motor racing. Look well ahead all the time. In a racing car, you'll get there very quickly. Note where that turn-in point is and make sure you've completed all your braking and gear changes before you reach it. Trying to brake on the apex of a corner because you've come in too fast will almost certainly cause the car to spin. Clip the apex of the corner, then feed in the power so that you exit with full throttle. Finally, the heel and toe gear change. We need to understand a little of the physics at work here to appreciate this one. As you brake, the engine revs drop off fast. At high speed, if you simply dropped a cog and banged it into a lower gear, at this point you'd slow the car dramatically and put enormous strain on the gearbox. So, after depressing the clutch, you should blip the throttle with the side of your foot to bring the revs back up before dropping back into gear. Basically, we're trying to match the engine revs to the speed of the wheels, and it does take some practice. It's time for Simon to go solo. This first session in a proper single-seater racing car is the moment at which most people find out whether they're hooked for life or will return to enjoying the sport from the comfort of their armchair. Nothing could be more different from your normal road car. Firstly, you're sitting in the middle. It sounds strange, but this completely changes your perspective of the car. Secondly, you're extremely close to the ground and you're driving a vehicle with far more power and braking capabilities than you're used to.
In front of you here, you've got the rev counter. 4,000 revs is the limit, okay, so no more than 4,000 when you're going round, please. You've got on the left the water temperature, 70 degrees is about where it should run, okay, no more than 70, but it should be okay, there shouldn't be any problem with that today, it's quite cool today. Oil pressure light, if that comes on while you're going round, then best to stop, okay? If you're a long way from the pits, then just stop where you are, we'll come and find out what's wrong. If you're near the pits, then come into the pit lane.
Right.
Okay, ignition switch is down here, just pull that on to switch the ignition on, that's the starter button on the right.
Okay.
Now, before you go out, let's just go through the gears. Gear change on the left, like a normal car, and it is a normal H pattern, so if you just go up on the left for first, back for second, up and across for third, back for fourth. Jolly good. Right, let's get it started up, pull that out, just check we're in neutral. Okay, let's get the visor down as well, and off you go, you're ready to go. Okay.
Brands Hatch uses Formula First single-seaters, and Ben is a former champion of the class. Who better then to give Simon his pre-drive briefing? That first drive is a moment to savour. Whether you've aspirations to take up the sport seriously or it was just one of those things you had to try, it's a memory that lives with you forever. But if you are serious about getting involved, that drive marks the first in hundreds of laps before you perfect your technique. To put it all into perspective, Simon will achieve lap times of around 75 seconds by the end of his first day in the single-seater. Ben would average 52 seconds per lap in a race and has held the lap record for the class at Brands with times close to 50 seconds. But what of the car itself? Well, the Formula First was designed to offer proper single-seater racing at an affordable price. It's a restricted class. In other words, everyone has the same equipment, all manufactured and supplied by Van Diemen here in Britain, and you're not allowed to tamper with the engine. If we strip away the fiberglass body shells, we can see how the car is constructed. Built around a strong monocoque shell, that's the tubular box that protects the driver, the car is made up of specially machined parts that are incredibly light, all aimed at maximising the power-to-weight ratio. The engine is a standard Ford XR2 power unit connected to a 5-speed gearbox. It looks and feels incredibly fast. The class is acknowledged as being one of the most competitive of the junior formulas and always attracts full grids.
How was it, Simon? That's it.
Very good.
You enjoy it?
Yeah, very good indeed.
Got a different experience?
Very different. A lot faster, I'm sure.
Yeah? You're getting used to the fact the wheels are all around you, bouncing up and down and seeing exactly what's going on.
And the sensation of speed is phenomenal.
Absolutely. Did you stay within 4,000 revs?
Oh yes.
Of course you did.
Absolutely.
I believe you.
Learning to drive like a racing driver is one thing, competing in a race is another. Watch as Ben takes on 2 other instructors in a short race.
Number 10 dives into an immediate lead and obviously trying to protect his line a bit there on the outside. Try and go around the outside of him a little bit while number 8 goes through on the inside. Just about managed to get around the outside, number 10. Well, we've got number 8 in front of us, but there's no way I can get past there because I'm blocked out. So we've still got number 10 on the inside. A little bit too wide there. We've lost a bit of ground, so see if we can make it back up again. Number 10 in front of us, number 8 as well. Number 10 going for the overtaking manoeuvre. Now, am I going to be able to sneak through as well? It's quite possible I can get through on the inside here and try and go around the outside of number 8. Nearly there, but not quite. Let's get on the power and see how we can get the drag as we come onto the straight. Up on the outside still. Number 8 just there on our inside. We've got a good draft past him. And he's going past number 10 as well. And it looks like we've got the nice wide line as we go into Paddock Bend here. Just about managing to sneak through as we come up towards Druids. On the brakes, going for the wide line, but no, he's just managed to sneak in on the brakes on the inside. Enough the other one's just there as well, so I'm going to defend my line now a bit as we come into Graham Hill Bend. And so number 8 retakes the lead. I've got number 10 on my other side now, on the left hand side, trying to sneak through. I've got a bit of a run on 8. Now, can we get a clear run through here? Not quite. Is the answer. Trying to get back on curves again. Trying to go around the outside of both the other cars. Got to leave enough room as well. They tend to come through. We're getting a good exit out of clearways again. Managed to get past both of them. So into paddock, we're leading again. Try and keep it smooth now. Try and extend that lead if possible. Just coming over to the middle a little bit. Try and protect my line, but I've gone a little bit too wide there on the way in. Number 8 on the inside, I'm getting a bit dusty there on the outside of that corner, just getting on the dirt, and he's got the line into that one now. No, lost a bit of ground again there. See what we can do into Surtees this time. Have a little look, just upset him a bit maybe. Try and go around the outside of him. No, not quite, can't do it this time. We've got number 8 coming up the inside as well. Really close stuff. Can we get the power on again as we come past number 10? Just about. As we accelerate up there. Overtaking on the outside. Coming up to the checker flag. Yes! Just about in front.
Those that successfully complete a racing school course are faced with another set of problems, not the least of which is the decision of whether to compete in road or track events. We'll take a look at rallying later in the programme, but an interesting event that mixes both disciplines is rallycross. The concept is simple. About one half of each lap is run on a conventional racing track, the other half on an off-road section, which is usually bumpy and very slippery. Drivers compete in a number of short heats, which decide the grid positions for a grand final. The races are short and wild. With large grids and little room to overtake, the racing can get pretty heated. Although frowned upon, there's a great deal of bumping and boring as the cars fight for position and traction. Will Gollop is the current British rallycross champion.
The sport demands aggression to get the total commitment out of the car and yourself, but it's a non-contact sport, believe it or not, and it is frowned upon sort of fairly heavily nowadays. That, avoidable contact is, you know, there's some severe penalties for it. I think if you look at other forms of motor racing, you can see some contact that goes on that doesn't get stopped. There isn't any way you can go and practice a circuit and become the quickest driver, if you like, because it's not particularly down to how much you practice, it's how you react at the time, because the lines change so much with changing conditions, and because they're fairly fraught races, we have 3 qualifying runs and a final usually. It's 110% all the time.
But today, even 110% was not enough for Will to win one of his heats. Mechanical trouble found the champion back in the pits, with his team working against the clock to get him back onto the grid in time for his next heat. Anxious moments for Will, frantic activity for the mechanics.
So, Will, what happened? The gearbox is broken somewhere inside. Whether it's a linkage or whether it's a shaft, we don't know yet.
Are you going to be able to fix it?
Yeah, the new, well, not the new, but the other rebuilt gearbox is back in it now.
So how long have you got before your next heat?
About another 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour, but that's nearly done, so that's like about a half-hour job.
And you're confident that that gearbox will work as well as the other?
Yeah.
And 10 minutes later, Will was back on the grid, ready to race in his final. These cars are incredibly powerful. Will's Metro 6R4 develops around 400 brake horsepower and can go from 0 to 60 in 1.6 seconds. A lot of machinery to handle on a dry circuit, let alone a rain-drenched, muddy off-road section.
This is the Audi Quattro that the great Hannu Mikkola used to win the 1985 Beijing Rally. Well, from the outside, apart from this fancy paintwork here, I suppose, and a few extra headlights it's got, it looks pretty much like a standard road model. But don't be misled by appearances. With a highly tuned turbocharged engine in here giving something over 400 horsepower, special suspension and gearbox, a roll cage to protect the driver and his passenger, altered steering ratio, extra instrument gauges, well, it might just as well come from a different planet, mightn't it? A far cry from the vehicles used in the early days of rallying. Standard, often luxurious cars were used in rallies that spanned complete continents. Today, it's a high-tech, highly competitive sport that demands total concentration from the drivers. In addition to the skills shown by track racers, the rally driver has to deal with uneven, often slippery road surface and acute corners. Although the concept of the correct turn-in, clip and exit points are not forgotten, the emphasis is on controlling the sideways movement of the car. Its drift, subtle use of the throttle and wheel control the drift through the corner, ensuring that the car exits at maximum speed. Back in the winter of 1978, high in the Scandinavian snow-covered mountains, Hannu Mikkola and Bjorn Voldegard drove a demonstration race on a track carved out of the ice. Apart from the tyres with small studs in them, the cars were unchanged. The almost mesmerizing degree of car control shown by these accomplished drivers offers some insight into the skills needed to compete at the top level of modern-day rallying. I've been enrolled in motor racing for over 40 years and haven't even come close to driving every type of event. I think that's one of the attractions of the sport. Nearly everything that can be raced is raced, from little Citroën 2CVs to massive turbocharged trucks.
Truck racing is one of motorsport's newest attractions. For thrills and spills, it's hard to beat. All over Europe, the sport attracts huge crowds, and many top drivers from all types of motorsport are now being enticed behind the wheel of these monsters. World champion motorbike racer Barry Sheene has tried his hand at the sport, and fellow biker Steve Parrish is a regular competitor. With an all-up weight of nearly 6 tons, these are no lightweight flyers, but their massive turbocharged engines take them up to around 150 miles an hour. That's a lot of machinery to lose control of. Stock car racing is an old favourite with the crowds. Unlike all other forms of motorsport, pretty much anything goes.
Motor racing is unique in its ability to bring sport and big business together. Some of the major car manufacturing companies have a vested interest in being seen to produce successful racing cars, probably aimed, of course, at appealing to the common-day dream of being a Formula One racer. But more importantly, the top end of motor racing provides a test bed that allows the manufacturers to try out new ideas, many of which, of course, eventually find their way onto road cars. A good example is the turbocharger, for instance, now a popular option on many models of road vehicles. This was invented for and developed on the racetrack. The role of the racing driver in the development of a car and the engine is critical, and it provides a vital link between the engineer and what the vehicle feels like, how it handles. This test driving, of course, provides a ready source of income and valuable experience for many young professional racing drivers.
In no form of motor racing is test driving more important than Formula One. This is the forefront of the sport, the sharp end, where the money is spent. Each Formula One car is the product of months of computer assessment, wind tunnel testing, engine development, and finally, track testing. For every Grand Prix star you see on the television, there are dozens of equally dedicated people who work behind the scenes. The test driver is an integral part of this network. Most of the development is done without the stars behind the wheel. Test drivers, highly experienced people who often live in the shadow of the team's celebrated race drivers, provide that essential connection between the handling characteristics of the car and the engineers. It's a highly sophisticated business. Modern Formula One cars have high-tech communications links that allow the pits crew to monitor the performance of the engine as though they were sitting in the cockpit. However quick a car, it must be specially set up to produce maximum performance for each circuit. Every week of the Grand Prix series presents a different problem. Some tracks favour cars set up to handle a slow, complex series of corners. Others are out-and-out sprints, favouring the car that's able to produce the highest speed down long straights. The modern Formula One car can best be likened to a fighter aircraft, for its aerodynamics that largely determine success. Fine, it's relatively easy to produce an engine with a vast amount of power. But now try and make that engine as light as possible and find a frame that can harness its energy and remain controllable. Strangely enough, a lot of time is spent effectively slowing cars down. The wings that are a familiar feature of the modern Formula One car are designed to suck the car down onto the track, but each degree of downforce, so essential for control through the corners, means a little more drag down the straight. The playoff between these adjustments and the suspension and gearbox ratios that are chosen for each circuit largely determine the feel and ultimate speed of the car. Finally, the tyres. The driver's ultimate contact with the track must be chosen.
Up until the late 1960s, the type of tyre used in racing is very similar to the type of tyre that we see on the road today. The rubber surface is cut with treads all the way around the circumference, and this means this type of tyre could be used in both dry and wet conditions, as these channels clear the water away on a rainy circuit. Now, in the late 60s, the tyre companies came up with a different idea. Why not increase the surface area of the tyre on the circuit and not have any treads at all for dry road use? Therefore, they came up with a slick. Here we see one of the slicks. Absolutely no tread at all. We just have little holes to indicate the tread depth, and these sort of tyres give a lot more grip in the dry conditions. Of course, in the wet conditions, not much use, too much aquaplaning. Therefore, we have to go for this type of tyre, the wet tyre, with large channels, really able to clear as much water as possible from the surface of the circuit, and therefore avoid the car aquaplaning on the wet surface. Now, being a wet tyre, it also can be of a softer compound. The compound of rubber used on the tyre is critical to the tyre's performance. The wet tyre running in cooler conditions can afford to be a softer type of tyre, as it is less likely to wear out. In hard, dry conditions, where very high temperatures may be, you have to run a hard compound on the slick tyre to avoid it being worn out before the end of the race.
It is always a gamble, and many races have been won or lost on the choice of tyre. Most teams nowadays monitor the circuit surface temperature in the hours leading up to the start of a race before making that all-important choice between up to 6 different compounds of tyre. An important decision that determines whether the driver maintains full control.
Coming to a stop there, as I did, from about 25 miles an hour, my body's subject to about 1G deceleration. Now, if we consider a modern Formula One car going through the corners, the driver can be subject to anything up to 4G lateral force pushing him sideways as he goes through the corner. We can then begin to understand quite why the modern Formula One driver needs to be as physically fit as he is.
Imagine, if you can, travelling from 0 to 60 in 1.2 seconds, about the time it takes to say Jack Robinson. Impressive, eh? But now consider the braking capabilities of these machines. The average Formula One car can go from 0 to 120 and back to a standstill in about 12 seconds. The forces experienced by the drivers are tremendous, so much so that they can lose up to 7 pounds of body weight in a single race. Motor racing now faces a serious dilemma. The cars can be made to go ever faster. But can the racing driver develop ever faster reactions to keep them under control?
Obviously, we've only been able to show you a small part of what goes into becoming a top racing driver. No TV program can teach you how to do that. But remember, for every Formula One driver, there are thousands of people who compete in motor racing just for the fun of it. If this program has given you a desire to have a go yourself, then please make sure that you do it safely. Sign on with a proper racing school, most of which offer initial trials, which give you a taste of the sport and let you decide whether you want to become more involved. But please, don't try out any of the racing techniques on the road. As we said at the start of the programme, the two things just don't go together.